most people would agree that most of the polio that was happening in the early, 19th century or whatever was not caused by virus. It was caused by DDT or arsenic or whatever it was.
Right.
So
Paris green. And even if you go in further, in the late 1800s, the drug of choice that was given for like a cure-all for infants and for children was a drug called calomel. And it was a drug, mercury-based drug. And
yes.
And so I think my hunch suspicion is that they shifted the blame away from the medical establishment on a virus.
Totally.
And so they wouldn't take the blame. And then if you fast forward to, like you mentioned, DDT.
To August of last year, nobody really knew who I was.
There's about 12 people who are producing 65% of anti-vaccine misinformation.
We need to come together as Americans and realize that we have a war at hand here. Right?
Like, dude, how scared of this shit do you have to be to be wearing gloves, a face shield, and a mask at this point?
Help us to urge folks and say to them, look, it's time to roll up your sleeve and get the shot.
Chiropractor in Omaha, Nebraska, responsible for 65% of the anti-vaccine misinformation. Put what I say to the test. Just don't write me off as crazy misinformation.
Doctor, please bring yourself in order. 600,000 people will die of cancer. 300,000 people will die of obesity this year. When is enough enough?
Well, hey, welcome to the show, Katie Collins. It's good to see you again. How are you?
I'm doing great, Dr. Ben. How are you?
Great. Well, what are you up to this Friday?
I've had a full day. I had a little podcast interview before you, and I had a consult before that. So I've just had a busy work day. Friday is the only day that I really quote unquote work because my husband works full time, and so he has Fridays off. So okay. Today's my day.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually really excited to be sitting down with you and talking with you. I really, I know we didn't know each other prior to the HighWire, and so I think the HighWire brought us together and connected well. And I just really wanted to bring you on just for a recap for my listeners to get to know you, what you're all about, and also maybe continue our conversation from the HighWire. I think it was such an interesting conversation, and man alive, was that a marathon?
Yeah, that was a long show. That was awesome. It was a great experience. It really was. I mean, the whole experience was super fun, coming to the house before. It's also beautiful, and getting to share a meal together and chat with you. And then, getting to see the whole set of the HighWire. I mean, they really have it decked out. Like it's a total news studio with all the, all the big TVs, and they're queuing like during the show. It was really fun. It was a totally fun experience.
It was a lot of fun. And it was just really, I'm very thankful for the opportunity. So thanks to Dell and the HighWire. Yeah. But it was such an interesting conversation, and, and I'm thankful to be part of that conversation. I did feel a little bit when they brought in, Tom Cowan, and I'm just like, shit, what's going to happen? I feel like I was a little bit under the gun there, but and I don't want people to think that I was the antagonist to Dell and what he stands for. And, but there is, once you go down these rabbit holes, and a lot of this in the history, what it does, it raises more questions.
Yeah.
And it, if anything, it tells us that we don't have all the answers.
Right.
And I think that's fair to say. But have you gone down any more rabbit holes since the show? Have you changed any thinking? Have you thought about anything? Have you looked at anything, or just kind of just?
Alec sent me the link for the big webinar that he did do, and I'm planning on watching it. I haven't gotten the chance to yet. I have 2 babies under 2, so I haven't really gotten a chance to do any further research on this. It's just interesting to see. I was really interested to see the reaction afterward, because it really, there's doctors I trust on kind of both sides of this aisle, right? And it really, I think it is a great debate. I think it's one that, I said this on the show where I always appreciate the discussion of how do we know what we know? Like, what are these like foundational claims that basing all of our information on? I think those are fantastic questions to ask. And it definitely seems like there are some holes in the field of virology where there may be error or, whatever kind of way that they have figured out to manipulate whatever they're manipulating. It seems like there's error in that. And I can totally acknowledge that. Honestly, I really agree with like 95% of what you guys say. I think I just am a little bit, I still have the same question of, if viruses don't exist, what is in the vial? Like, what is in the vaccine? Like, what are they like? That's my good. And I just feel like there obviously is something happening in the vial that's making this phenomenon of widespread, whatever you call it, illness or whatever. I don't even know what you want to call it, but it's something where it's like those things aren't happening as in the way as they were prior to these vaccines coming out. And so I still have that main question, but again, I fully believe in most of the dysfunction that happens within the body is either due, I loved how you put that on the show, is either due to toxicity or deficiency. Like I completely agree with that. I think I completely agree with that, where I would probably, I think where I kind of land is I think it's a little bit of both. If you do have some toxicity or deficiency, you may be more vulnerable to whatever pathogens are coming, right? But that's kind of that extra piece where I still am kind of like, I think there are pathogens that can have these things. But, again, I fully am supportive of supporting your terrain and figuring out different things that are affecting our terrain, like EMFs or mold or parasites or whatever's happening. I'm like, yes, that's all happening. Like, that's all happening. So I totally am on board for all of that. Whether the question of whether these pathogens exist, and I can ask you more questions about this, but there's the question of pathogens, like viral pathogens, if they exist at all. But then I also got the feeling kind of from you that even bacterial pathogens aren't necessarily contagious. Is that kind of, I'm a little confused there too.
Yep. So I'm going to zoom out 30,000 feet here. And I think because once we get the big idea, everything else follows, right? So I believe that we're fearfully and wonderfully made. I believe that we didn't evolve from monkeys, and I believe God designed the body. And so we have more bacteria on the body and in the body than we do cells. And
absolutely.
So it is a symbiotic relationship. So understanding that concept and understanding that we just can't compartmentalize the body, even though God, I believe, has compartmentalized areas of the body for good reason.
Good reason,
like we have bacteria in the colon and the digestive system, but not in the vascular system. And so I think if bacteria gets in the vascular system, then it can be very problematic. But and so if we do have bacteria in the vascular system, do we blame the bacteria, or is there another reason why that bacteria is there? And so we need to simplify this conversation and simplify means to remove the unnecessary. But going into, I made the illustration of what comes first, the flies or the trash. And so that's my philosophy, is that, and this is where it gets confusing because bacteria can cause problems. Bacteria can be very problematic. And this is why I said if we were to do a bacterial culture test on everybody's throat in the world, we're going to find Streptococcus bacteria.
Right.
If we have an overaccumulation of that strep throat, is that the cause of the strep throat, or is there an underlying diseased reason? And I think that's the issue. But my whole concept is if we go back to the beginning and look at like polio, for instance, and I think this is where we need to look at the topic. And I've made the statement to Dell that, hey, we're in the same team here. And I don't just go guns blazing saying, oh, viruses don't exist.
Yeah, you gotta wait for that gun.
Right. And it's like, we don't feed a baby steak here. We're feeding them milk, and so when people...
Steak was my baby's first food. It's good for their jaw. Come on,
Yeah,
Dr. Ben.
right. Yeah, get that masculine jawline, right? But I think it's, I think one of those things where it's like, we go in the topic of, and I'm with Del, like we need to, once we get beyond the topic of, okay, vaccines are bad, then we can get on some more solid food here.
Yeah.
But I think just a history of vaccinations and vaccinology, it's rooted in a lot of how do I say it, fear, and it's a lot of lies. Like you look at, and this is where I try to bring in, raise awareness on calomel, the drug, and polio, and how they almost renamed polio to shift the blame, because in history, when the medical establishment doesn't know the cause of something, they blame it on a virus, like
right.
Scurvy, and he was blaming on a bacteria or virus, and we know it's vitamin C deficiency.
Right.
But so my point is, electron microscopes weren't invented until 1930s. How do they know from that time period that these were viruses? They couldn't see it, they couldn't visualize it, and there was they called them undetectables. And that's, to me, that should be highlighted in the conversation, because if we understand that piece, there's just so many questions, and I don't have the answer. I don't have the answer, but I have the questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think polio is honestly an easy conversation for me to have, because there were so many things that could have caused polio. Like you said, poliomyelitis is the condition. It's the inflammation there. And there are things that can cause inflammation of the spinal cord and paralysis, like DDT and different, there were pesticides. There was so many things that could have caused similar symptoms of polio that I completely acknowledge, that I totally acknowledge. But what I think is interesting is how they noted, and I haven't looked back further into this. I think Dissolving Illusions by Dr. Suzanne Humphreys is a book where she goes into the really deep history of polio, and how they noticed that third world countries are immune to certain strains of polio that developed countries are not necessarily immune to. And why is that? And I think that is because of all of the intervention and the pesticides and all of the things that are making us toxic.
We'll be right back after a word for our sponsor. This episode is sponsored by Ezra Healing, a leader in the emerging wellness paradigm taking shape across North America and beyond. People everywhere are recognizing that the old sick care model, quick fixes, symptom chasing, and surface level solutions simply isn't enough. Ezra Healing is a part of the shift toward truly patient-centered care that prioritizes well-being, integrity, and a do-no-harm approach. At Ezra Healing, your whole lifestyle, rhythms, and patterns are considered to better support the interconnected systems of your body. They're focused on real solutions, long-term health promotion, and prevention, an evolving grassroots movement dedicated to helping individuals and families live healthier and more resilient lives. If you're ready for a wellness experience that puts humanity first, Ezra Healing is guiding the way. To learn more, visit them at www.ezrahealing.com. And now back to the show.
Right. But they did notice there was some difference between indigenous countries and like developed countries. Right. And so I and again, I don't know, when I listened to her on your podcast, I actually did listen to her on your podcast, where she said, like, I don't call myself a virus denier. I'm just a historian. And so she's looking at what the history has informed us in terms of those things. But I don't know if she looked further into how they actually isolated those, types of pathogens. But again, I think polio is something that we can all acknowledge that they didn't even know, like most people would agree that most of the polio that was happening in the early, 19th century or whatever was not caused by virus. It was caused by DDT or arsenic or whatever it was.
Right.
So
Paris green. And even if you go in further, in the late 1800s, the drug of choice that was given for like a cure-all for infants and for children was a drug called calomel. And it was a mercury-based drug. And
yes.
And so I think my hunch suspicion is that they shifted the blame away from the medical establishment on a virus.
Totally.
And so they wouldn't take the blame. And then if you fast forward to, like you mentioned, DDT and Paris green, have you ever read The Moth in the Iron Lung?
I read that, but I've been recommended to read it several times. Yes. I know the premise of the book.
Yeah. So so the DDT and the Paris green and the arsenic and lead based pesticides, causing neurological problems. And so it's interesting to think, like, well, maybe there is a virus that's doing this, or there is a toxicity issue. And so that to me is like, well, which one is it? If there's a virus.
Let me ask you something though, because I like at this moment right now, there are more cases reported of vaccine derived polio in the world than polio wild type, right?
Yes. So
what are they identifying that they can say this is vaccine derived polio?
So polio is diagnosed by location and observation, right? So polio, we know the word, break it down. Polio is gray.
Right. Yes.
Mile is spine and itis is inflammation. So we diagnose it by location observation by observing inflammation in the spinal cord of the gray matter, the anterior horn. Right. So my point is, if I were to give arsenic, lead, mercury, anything that's going to be a neurotoxin and like a metal toxicity, it will target the anterior horn of the gray matter of the spinal cord. And so from a biological standpoint, it's almost bioidentical to, metal toxicity or polio is bioidentical in that regard. So my point is that these vaccine, the live attenuated, if I'm right, they use a higher level of metals in these live attenuated vaccines. And so
there's no thimerosal in, or at least in the ingredients listed. In the ingredients listed on the vaccine, there's no heavy metals in the polio one.
So you have to understand the manufacturing process of thimerosal.
Right, and they have.
It is impossible to get thimerosal out of these vaccines in the manufacturing side. It might be in some form of, they'll have to change completely the way they do vaccines. So it might not be listed in the ingredient list because there's a manufacturing, there's production and development, three-stage process of these vaccines. And even Trump posted a video last year, a phenomenal video of the manufacturer saying it's impossible to get away from thimerosal. Every vaccine's in the manufacturing process of thimerosal. So it is a mercury, 49% mercury. And so this is my point of these live attenuated. We still have aluminum nanoparticles. We still have formaldehyde. We still have MSG, which has and polysorbate 80 and other ingredients in here. We have cell lines, MDCK cell lines that can cause inflammatory issues in the spine. So my point is, some of these live attenuated polio-induced vaccination, I think that can cause inflammation of the gray matter of the spinal cord, hence being bioidentical to polio. So I think those things do exist. But going back to the stages, though, we have to look at, is it a toxicity or is it a virus? And I think the PCR test also needs to be exposed. I'm not sure if you looked at any of the research of the PCR test.
Yeah. I mean, I know that basically the way the test is created is based on what they kind of arbitrarily choose as these sequences in in genes based on what they see or based on what they put in a computer and it kind of pops out of like whatever it is. Yeah. So I again, like I am fully aware of how, especially for COVID, those PCR tests were just total crap. Like it just doesn't even, I don't know. I mean, and obviously that calls into question PCR testing in general. So I acknowledge that question for sure.
And that's good. And I think that, and the bottom line, Katie, is that I think that I was talking to Alec about this, and I started thinking about how profitable this germ theory is, because this spills into agricultural. Like we pasteurize our milk, and people can't even. They're like, well, I'm lactose intolerant, but I can stomach raw milk just fine. It's like when you pasteurize it, it kills it off. And think about how profitable the pasteurization side of things is, and the bacteria and the pesticide usage and all that. We got to figure the bugs and get rid of these bugs, and it's like this. It's a $1 trillion industry.
Right. Yeah. No. I again, like this is what I mean. I don't disagree with you on a lot of these things. I think that I'm 100% on board knowing that this is a completely profitable industry. There's a lot of holes in these things. What I get confused is, I think about something like tuberculosis or pertussis or something. Like there are bacterial things that like, you know, like my sister-in-law and my husband, actually, we have yet to get him TB tested, but she went to Russia and afterward, and they helped, it was a missionary trip. So they were doing things in like nursing homes or whatever. And afterward, she came home and did a TB test and she tested, you know, she had this massive welt on her arm indicating that she had some exposure to TB. And so she's a completely healthy person in terms of her, you know, like, well, I'll give her, you know, she's not like in terms of like being a regenerative, like, you know, like I don't know how healthy her diet was at the time, but in terms of just not having any severe medical conditions, like there shouldn't be any reason for her to get like tuberculosis or whatever. So that's like, you know, is that something where it's like you can't catch a cold? It's like, okay, I can acknowledge that not every time somebody gets the sniffles, it's due to a virus. Like it could be due to pressure changes, weather, like all those things. But there are, you know, like you said, we can test people for something like strep, and people can get an overgrowth of strep in their throat, and we have to give them antibiotics. But something like tuberculosis or pertussis, you can be colonized, but tuberculosis, I don't think you can be colonized with TB and not get it. Right?
I mean, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I think that, you know, and this is where things are interesting and things are confusing. This is why we need to keep seeking question and keep seeking the truth, keep asking questions, and keep having this dialogue. Because my biggest issue is that the science is not settled. It's never settled. And these bumper sticker slogans that say, "Oh, so the science is settled," you know, I think it's really to discourage those that are seeking, and really to just discourage those that to keep seeking. And I think that the one thing is true is that we don't have all the answers. And I think if we really zoom out and look at what we do know about the body, it's really primitive, you know, and again, we're fearfully and wonderfully made, you know, and it's, God designed this body, and we're still learning. There's so much to learn and how things work. And I don't know if we'll ever have the full answers here with everything,
right?
You know, right. But the one thing, Katie, is that I really, 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 really value, you know, your heart in all this, that you've, you know, your willingness to come on the show, to be brave and courageous, to come out and have this conversation, because it's important. We need to have this conversation. And I'm so thankful to have this conversation with you, because, you know, we're not enemies. We're not, you know, we're not on the opposite team here. We want the same thing. We all want healthy people. We want people to be well. We want people to be well. And you've been doing a very good job at getting the truth out to the people. But, you know, and we do, we might work in a little bit of a different paradigm in some areas, but we're on the same team. And, you know, and I always tell people that you have a different tool set than I do, and other MDs have different tool sets, and it's okay to have those conversations. But I think in today's world, so many people are such contrast, and people are like, "Oh, it's so polarizing." And, you know, it's like, no, we all want the same thing. We want people to be well. We want people to be healthy, and we want to overcome disease.
Yes.
And this is why we're having that topic of the cause, of the why.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just want to ask you, on a personal level, what made you get into healthcare?
Yeah, I mean, as a young child, my mom told me that whenever somebody would get injured, even as young, when I was like 7 or 8 or something, I would always be like, let me help you, like, you know, don't move, like, and just try to, you know, help that person out. And I think my mom was so good at fostering that, you know, kind of, I'm an extroverted personality. I love talking to people. And she was so good at looking and seeing what I was interested in, and kind of forging that path for me. I was homeschooled growing up, but I was also a part of like a really cool co-op that did science classes where I got to dissect frogs, and I just loved it. My mom was like, "You're really into this. Like, let's totally go for it in this case." And so I have my mom to thank really for just kind of seeing the passion that I have for people, and I love talking to people, and just the interest I had for the human body, that she just was like, hey, this can be a really, great path for you. Because I had the flexibility of being homeschooled, I took community college classes when I was in high school. I was able to graduate early, and then I got my degree in kinesiology, which is exercise science. And that's where a lot of kinesiologists will kind of jump into chiropractics too. And that's why it was such a fun major, because, and it really kind of, I think that's where it, because I didn't grow up super like crunchy, you could say. Like, I was very kind of standard American diet. Like, I mean, my mom cooked at home, but it was, we went to McDonald's, like, we did all of these things. So it wasn't like I was this super holistic, like my mom was this like super holistic granola person. Pretty conventional, but I think that major in kinesiology really set a foundation of, you can be healthy if you eat right and you move well, right? And that's, it's like, that is such a, if you do that, you could be really, really healthy in so many ways, and avoid disease, and that's why it was such a fun major, because everybody really went into, some people went into public health, some people went into chiropractics, physical therapists, athletic trainers, and then some went more into the medical model, like nursing or PA school, like I did. And yeah, just as I was kind of going through grads, like, I was a medical assistant in an urgent care, and then I went into PA school. It really just, everything I was learning, it was so fun. Like, it's just so fun to learn about how God created the body fearfully and wonderfully, and how complex it is, and how much we don't know, like you said, kind of about. They don't even know really how, like, the whole theory. I don't even know if we could, it's how insulin works, like in diabetes. Like, they don't even really know how, like, insulin gets into the cells, and glucose, like, they don't even, like, it's so funny how they just like say this is how it is, and then you really like get into how they know these things, and they really don't know a lot of these things. So it's, I completely acknowledge that there's so many things in medicine that we say that we know, and we don't really know. And I think that's the beauty of it, where, like you said, we're kind of on this same team of, we want people to be well, and there are different tools, like you said. And for the person who got, like my father-in-law worked on a farm, and he got a nasty cut, and it turned into MRSA, and he almost lost his arm, like, because of a crazy antibiotic. Like, he needed full IV antibiotics. He almost got his arm chopped off because of a bacterial infection. And so he needed emergency care at that time. But, like, at the same time, that is not the same as helping people be well in their day-to-day life. And that is something that I think is becoming so much more important now, because we're realizing how we live our day-to-day life is how we avoid things like disease, whether it be chronic disease or even acute diseases. I mean, even people who are healthy will be less likely to die of all things. All cause mortality goes down, whether it be accidents, bacterial infections, or chronic conditions. So it's if you're a healthy person, the risk for that goes down. And so I think getting into healthcare, it's just exciting to, know all of these things, and also know what we don't know, but just help other, moms my age now, kind of figure these things out.
So when did you become a little crunchy and especially on the vaccine side?
Yeah. I graduated physician assistant school in 2020. What a year to graduate, right? So I was pulled out of my clinical rotation in the emergency room, because in March of 2019, I guess. Wait, no, that was 2020. Yeah, March 2020, when the world, shut down, and they're like, we're all going to die, it's COVID or whatever. And, where I was pulled out of my rotations, and thankfully I graduated on time, and I had gotten a job out of graduation in an urgent care. Fantastic experience, because it was so, I call it restaurant medicine. Like, it's just people come in knowing what they want, and they're mostly healthy, and then they you give them what they want and they go home, and you don't have to, you don't have to, but I do like continuity of care now, but before it's just kind of fun to do people would come in with stitches and like, all of those fun procedures. I really enjoy those things. But anyway, in that first job, I was seeing 70 patients a day I was seeing 70 patients. My supervising physician was seeing 70 patients, and it was all just for COVID testing. And there was so much fear. I saw maybe 2 people who needed to probably go to the hospital, like where they were sick enough where I was like, you're like not doing well. 2 out of 70 patients a day for months. Like, I mean, two cases. It was incredible. And I was really like, we shouldn't be as nervous about this as we are. And I heard about ivermectin, and I tried to prescribe it to one of my patients, and my supervising physician told me I couldn't do it. And I was like, why? And he goes, you're not allowed to, it's a horse drug. Don't do that. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, this is what, like, I mean, there are doctors say this won a Nobel Prize. Like, what are you saying? Like, they're saying that this can work. It's totally safe. Why aren't we doing this? And so that was weird for me. And I was just like, something's off here. And it was actually my mom on a mom Facebook group who told me and my dad, she's like, they're going to come out with the vaccine, and this is why this whole thing is happening. Like, she was kind of like the driver of like, this is all a conspiracy. And she was right. I mean, she was totally right. So that was what really sparked the maybe what I was taught is not all correct, right? Or maybe not everything in Western medicine is really correct. And that kind of went down, a rabbit hole. I heard one monumental podcast for me, talking about birth control for women. And my women's health class in PA school was a complete joke. It was a joke. It was put women on birth control. If they have any issues, they can come right off. They'll have babies afterwards and it'll be fine. And then every other problem, complete joke. I didn't learn. I don't even remember what I learned because it was so bad. And I listened, to this one podcast with a functional OB, and I was like, what? Like, I was just like, this makes sense. Like, this is like, is real. So, that was where I was like, wow, everything I learned in school about women's health is totally a lie.
Right.
And then that went totally down the rabbit hole of, cholesterol isn't bad for you. Red meat doesn't give you cancer. That was kind of the next rabbit hole. And then I get married and get pregnant, and that's a whole rabbit hole of the cascade of interventions that happens during labor and delivery and all of the interventions they want to do during pregnancy.
Yep.
I mean, that's a massive rabbit hole. So it just was a total stepwise journey for me. It was like COVID kind of lifted the veil, and then then it was birth control, cholesterol, pregnancy, and I start having kids. And when I had decided to not vaccinate my kids, I was kind of just in the mindset of like, look, I'm going to be home with them. I'm a PA. I'm comfortable treating any disease that pops up. It looks like we can treat these things that pop up. Measles, vitamin A, or, pertussis, vitamin C. Like, there's different things that we can kind of do. And there's risk for severe disease, but seems like it would be pretty low for my children to get a severe disease of this. Now, that was where I was at when I first decided to not vaccinate my kids. Then I'm encouraged to kind of start my platform and share, kind of some of the facts that I've learned and, different decisions that I'm making with my family. And that was just at the encouragement of my family and friends. And as I'm kind of, I don't want to put any like false information out there. So I start getting, I don't know if you see this top shelf here. This is all vaccine books up here. And so I just put myself back to school when it came to vaccines, and wow, what I had no idea, like a bigger rabbit hole than birth control, cholesterol, and pregnancy combined. Like, I had no idea how massive this rabbit hole was. And it really has brought me to a place of like, it's of like, I don't think they're beneficial at all, really. I mean, but that's not the way I try to approach families, kind of like I said on the show, where you kind of have to have some tact, and you have to say, like, you can't just you can't, if you, because there's two sides to the internet. There's one that's saying they're safe and effective, and the other side is saying they're completely poison. And parents don't want to hear either side because they don't like extremes. They shut down. They like, really, it really is interesting to see how when a parent is actually asking questions, they don't want to hear the person yelling at them saying vaccines are poison. And they don't want to hear from the person who just says vaccines are safe and effective. They want like, what is the actual truth? And so the way I approach talking to parents now is saying, yeah, there are risks from, and this is the paradigm that I'm teaching in. So it's not, this is in the germ paradigm. So I say there's risk to disease, and there's risk known and unknown of vaccination, right? Because we kind of can quantify a lot of the risks coming from disease because we've observed this phenomenon so many times. We can kind of predict what may happen with these things.
We'll be right back after a word for our sponsor. Today's episode is sponsored by Ezra Healing, a place devoted to renewal and deep-rooted well-being. Ezra Healing supports individuals and families in soothing the nervous system, releasing accumulated stress and trauma, and restoring the body's God-given ability to repair and thrive. Their method is gentle, discerning, and grounded in honoring how the body was created to function. With steady guidance, thoughtful education, and practical resources, they come alongside each person to foster safety, resilience, and whole person healing. If you're seeking a space to breathe, rebalance, and truly heal, Ezra Healing offers a powerful path forward. To learn more, visit them at www.ezrahealing.com. And now back to the show.
With vaccines, the way that they were licensed, and this is something I say all the time with the clinical trials and everything, and how they're studied and how they're monitored in real time, there are some risks that the CDC will acknowledge, like a risk of seizures or a risk of Guillain-Barré syndrome or anaphylaxis. But that's pretty much it. Like, they don't really kind of go into all the potential reactions that could happen because they basically chalk it up to say that, the way it's reported, it could have been anything that caused that reaction. It may not have been the vaccine.
Right.
And so there's known and unknown risks to vaccination. And I think that approach has really been helpful for parents. I think me really trying to acknowledge the fact that there are issues that can happen, like there are phenomenon that can happen, like disease or whatever you want to call it, when you don't vaccinate, but there are risks that we do not know about when it comes to vaccination.
Well,
like, what are you more comfortable giving to your kid? Don't you want to, it's like, for me, I would never feel comfortable giving my child a medical product where I do not know the full risk profile of that medical product.
Well, that's it. I can't tell you how many times people are not getting the true informed consent. I just had to write an article about Operation Avocado. I'm not sure if you ever heard of that.
No, I haven't. Sounds fun.
It was the precursor to MK Ultra. And so,
oh yeah.
And so basically I got asked to shine light on it. And it was a CIA operative procedure that was done in the 50s to try to change behavior through vaccination. And so, going into this, I'm telling you, the rabbit hole runs so deep on all of vaccinations and the history. And that's why I always say, if people knew the history of vaccination, it would cause a revolution overnight. And, and so Operation Avocado, they were using medicines, vaccinations. They would try to put ingredients into Coca-Cola, water, food, to literally try to manipulate thought and to change behavior. There was a leaked Pentagon video back in the day that talked about how when we pray, or anyone that's so-called quote unquote religious, there's a certain Brodmann area of the brain that would light up. Mm-hmm. And this video was leaked. I believe that this video was true. This is before AI. This was probably over a decade ago since I've seen it. But the gentleman from the Pentagon saying that he said every terrorist is religious, and we can decrease this area, the Brodmann area of the brain, through vaccination. And so, and that's a continuation of Operation Avocado. And it's so my point is that this runs so deep that majority of the people, once we start diving into this, it's like, I'm just saying, keep digging, because it runs so deep that most people wouldn't even believe it. So I'm curious to know what books you have, and what books, like the top 3 vaccination books, besides Dissolving Illusions, what other books would you recommend that you have up there?
Yeah, well, it kind of depends on where they're at, honestly, in their little brain journey of talking about, thinking about vaccinations. For the family, and I just talked to a really sweet girl the other day where, she's married to a medical professional, and they have incredibly different opinions on vaccination, and they never would have. It's not something you think about. I don't think, at least women would have normally thought about, oh, does this person I'm dating, like, are they going to be super like vaxxy, or are they gonna, are they gonna want to do everything the doctor said? Like, that's not something you think about when you're choosing a partner. That's not something I thought about.
Thought about it.
Oh, good. Well, yeah. I mean, I at the time, I didn't think about it. Thank God my husband is like, he would love to talk to you about MK Ultra. He's like fully there. So that's where he's at. And so I'm thankful for that, but not everybody is so lucky where this is a really big contention point in a lot of marriages for folks. And it's really terrible. I can't imagine the experience. So one book I do recommend for, the medical professional who is just starting to kind of scratch the surface of, like, maybe not everything is as it seems. I think the Between a Shot and a Hard Place by Dr. Joel Gator is a good place to start, because he's a conventionally trained pediatrician. And he really makes an effort to be that middleman. It's almost annoyingly so, where you're like, okay, like, come on, there's more risks to vaccines than what you're talking about. But the way he has the book written, it's I think helpful for the introductory person who really is like who wouldn't even like say that their paradigm is shift. It's like the book that I suggest the spouse to bring, and just say, please just try, like, please just read this book, because it's so middleman that it's not really intimidating. Turtles All the Way Down, I think, is a great one, where it's talking about the clinical trials of vaccinations, and it's a big read, but it's a heavy it's easy to read, but it's thick, and there's a lot to go into, and I think they write it in a way that's really approachable. And that goes into kind of just the holes in the clinical trials that approve these vaccines. Let me see. I think the Unvax by RFK Jr. and Brian Hooker, those are showing studies between vaccinated and unvaccinated individuals, and that's a very easy read. Unavoidably Unsafe by Dr. Jeff Barkey. He's actually my supervising physician. I need to give him a call. I haven't talked to him in a minute, but he is a doctor out of Orange County, and there's another co-author also, but really just lays out that book contains a section on COVID, also the COVID vaccine, like all the mRNA shots and stuff. So I like how basic that one kind of is for folks. It's easy to read and go through each vaccine. But I have books by Dr. Paul Thomas up there too, like Vax Facts, I think is good. This one, How to Raise a Child in Spite of Your Doctor.
That's a good one.
That's a good one.
I have that book. I have a lot of those books that you've mentioned too. So many good books out there. The Poison Needle is a book that my dad gave me that was published in the 50s. That's a very good book.
Okay.
So that's one I'd recommend that really shines light on the polio corruption, talks about Dr. Oshner, who was invested in the polio vaccine, brought his grandchildren in front of a medical board saying, these vaccines are so safe. He vaccinated his grandson and granddaughter in front of the medical board. Within 24 hours, his grandson died, and the granddaughter developed transverse myelitis.
Unbelievable.
And that's all documented, but they cover that story.
You said The Moth and the Iron Lung too. That's a good one.
Moth and Iron Lung. Those are all good books. Another one I have is Facts Against Compulsory Vaccination. That was published in the early 1900s.
Okay.
So a lot of those historical books are good. Even getting your hands on a 9th edition Encyclopedia Britannica is really good. But I love to collaborate on libraries and books. And I know that's kind of nerdy, but I love to have those conversations because books are, I think, very important in today's world of censorship, And have you experienced, I know you've been vocal in the last year or two, have you experienced any censorship by speaking out?
I personally have, last week, actually, my Facebook was threatened to be deleted. So that, I don't know why though. I don't know which one it was. I don't know what I was talking about that it got deleted, but it's not deleted yet, but it was like, I got a notification that it was being looked at, but, no, I haven't. And I think that just speaks to the moment we're in. I mean, we really are in a point where, yes, I definitely think people are absolutely still being censored for what they say today. Absolutely. But at least the types of conversations where we're looking at the childhood schedule, which is mostly what I've talked about, we are now kind of able to have these conversations a little bit easier now, and with not as much censorship with this administration. Now, maybe that's because of the way I make an effort to really just I make an effort to say, like, there are risks to the disease and there's risks to the vaccine. And that's, I think, a true informed consent. And that's kind of the approach that I give. So maybe I'm not radical enough to be censored, but I think in my personal beliefs and my thoughts, I'm probably radical enough to be censored, but I try to really, I don't think people are responding so well to extremes anymore. I think they really just want to be met where they're at. And that's what I try to do for people. And that's why I do recommend different books for different people, because like you said, I can't give the medical professional who just graduated from medical school, You Can't Catch a Cold, that book by Alec, that Alec recommended. Like I feel like they would just be like, what are you doing? But you kind of have to meet people where they're at these days, and also recognize where you're at. And again, I think I'm probably more radical in my thoughts on a lot of things than I share on the internet. It's something where we just continue learning, and I love those book suggestions. So I'm definitely going to take a look.
Yeah. Well, Katie, I really value what you have to say. I really respect you. And I just, I think it's, I'm very thankful that you're in this field speaking the truth and on shining light on the vaccine corruption. There is no doubt in my mind, if you were speaking this 5 years ago, you'd have been deplatformed. 100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was deleted 6 times on Instagram, permanently banned on TikTok, banned on YouTube, PayPal, Venmo sees my accounts.
No. Oh man, that's terrible.
Terrible. Yeah, I can go on and on, but that's part of being part of the disinformation doesn't.
Right. Yeah.
You're part of the tribe. And so I just want to encourage you to keep pushing forward. And even when things it's not a matter of if you get censored on this topic, it's a matter of when.
When, right.
And so things are maybe a little easier and less depressed than we were 5 years ago on this topic. But there will be another so-called quote unquote pandemic. Bill Gates has said it. He's warned us. And so when that time comes, I encourage you to cling to the Lord and have that courage to speak the truth. I want to give you the last word here of encouragement to encourage the listeners and let people know where they can find you, Katie.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on, Dr. Ben. Really, it was such a pleasure, meeting you on Dell's show. And I think, like you said, we really, connected with our faith. And it's something that as Christians, we have a sure security knowing that whatever happens to us, we know that Jesus died on the cross for our sins and he rose again. And thank God for that, because we now have a relationship with the Lord and we'll be in eternity with him. And so and that, I think, gives people so much freedom to explore what makes us sick and what makes us healthy, because it's something where we know that God created us. We know that we're fearfully and wonderfully made, but we also know that there's sin and death and disease and wrong in the world. There's something wrong, and our world is broken. And thank God that He has promised to come back and renew and revive everyone and everything, including creation. And so we as Christians need to, that should give us motivation to be free in the way that we think and the way that we live, and free to optimize our body, because He calls us to, right? He calls us to treat our body as a temple of the Lord, and that we need to do that in the best way possible. The way I encourage the parents that I talk to, and I say this in every consult that I have, even if they're not Christians, I say, pray about the decisions that you're making for your children, especially mothers. Mothers are gifted with the sin of anxiety mostly, right? And that is why the Lord calls us to do not worry, do not fear so often. And mothers have a hard time listening to that. But I encourage mothers to listen to the Lord when He says, do not be anxious and do not fear, and really prayerfully go over these decisions that you're making for your children and for your families, and choose the one that you believe the Lord has called you to make, and make that decision prayerfully, and let that, security in knowing that whatever happens, even if something bad happens, God will use that experience to refine you and to bring glory to Himself. So even in the case of people who choose vaccination and who prayerfully did so, and their child has a bad reaction to that potentially, God will use that in their life as a testimony, as a way of growing them and growing His kingdom. And it's something where people can learn and grow in that. And I honestly, I just encourage people to have security that the Lord has ordained everything that comes to pass. And even whether it be good or bad, it's going to bring glory to Himself. And you are a part of that story.
Yeah. Amen. So where can people find you, Katie?
My Instagram is katieC.pac, and I introduce myself in all my videos as Katie the PA. I'm also on Facebook. I don't post as regularly on there. So I do most of my content on Instagram. I do have a subscription community where I answer questions directly, and I post long form classes on each of the vaccines on the childhood schedule monthly. And that link is in my bio. And then I also do private vaccination consultations for families trying to navigate the childhood schedule. And that link is in my bio as well.
Awesome. Well, Katie the PA, thank you for all your time today. Go support her. Go give her a follow. And go support her any way you can. Please, listening to this podcast, please just share this podcast far and wide. Thank you for all the listeners. Thank you for Ezra Healing for supporting this and sponsoring this podcast. Go support them. They stood in the gap in a big way during COVID. But I just want to send a message to all the listeners. Thank you. God bless you. Thank you for all the love and support. Katie, God bless you.
Thank you.
To August of last year, nobody really knew who I was.
There's about 12 people who are producing 65% of anti-vaccine misinformation.
We need to come together as Americans and realize that we have a war at hand here. Right?
Like, dude, how scared of this shit do you have to be to be wearing gloves, a face shield, a mask at this point?
Help us to urge folks and say to them, look, it's time to roll up your sleeve and get the shot.
Chiropractor in Omaha, Nebraska, responsible for 65% of the anti-vaccine misinformation. Put what I say to the test. Just don't write me off as crazy misinformation.
Doctor, please bring yourself in order. 600,000 people will die of cancer. 300,000 people will die of obesity this year. When is enough enough?